seek out and drive ghosts or banshees. They're the player's evil mirror, the alien's own Master Chief, equipped with the same traits and combat abilities, save for one key flaw. While the player is clear-headed and cool under pressure, the Covenant Elite has a temper that comes out. This causes them to roar in anger before charging the player, which is the prime opportunity to put them down. The Elites of Halo were an instant hit with fans, terrifying young gamers throughout the first level's careful introduction, and providing much laughter through their memorable quotes, which were derived from reverse human lines.
I'm the man! I am the man! What?
Whether they knew it or not, Bungie created a gaming icon, an enemy that would go up there with Goombas, Bokoblins, and headcrabs in terms of popularity. Their journey began here, and the first step in Halo Combat Evolved was a confident and solid one. The story of Halo Combat Evolved was incredibly simplistic and didn't paint anything other than broad strokes, and it was effective as an action shooter. Once it was complete, Bungie was ready to move on to new projects, but the success they accidentally created meant a sequel was demanded of them. The first game was a primarily human-focused adventure, with the alien Covenant being firmly at the end of the player's barrel. And so for the sequel, Bungie opened the door on the Covenant, their culture, their beliefs, and of course, what drove the beings that made Halo 1 so memorable: the Elites. The Elites of Halo 2 are a significant upgrade in detail over the first game. What was once just implied detail with low polygons and simple texture work was now highly defined, and the shield generators on their arms and legs now lit up in real time, dimming or glowing in response to the Elite's shield situation. Their animation work was also updated with new, more expressive idle and fidget animations, though it should be said their new run animation is a tad softer looking when compared to the original game's wide-legged jog. It gives the Halo 2 Elites a cute little shuffle when in motion, but something could be said about this, just adding to their charm.
Greetings!
Alongside the new animations came a new set of voice lines, due to the game wanting the player to empathize and understand what goes on in the enemy's head.
The demon is here.
The Elites are expressive, charismatic, and readable during the gameplay of Halo 2. And speaking of the gameplay, during development, Halo 2's combat was quite different from the free-flowing first game, drawing inspiration from market trends at the time. Bungie wanted the sequel to be a bit more of a tactical shooter. The Elites were primarily designed as an enemy that would push back on the player and force them to seek cover with fast-moving projectiles and suppressive capabilities. Plans did change during development, and for the final game, Bungie had to dramatically scale back the amount of AI in a location at any given time, as well as the complexity in the environments and their cover. With no time to really retune the AI behaviors for the new scaled-down environments and reworked player mechanics, the Elites of Halo 2 often come off as both more aggressive and less responsive. In wide-open spaces, they provide very little breathing room for the player to dodge attacks, and when there was cover for the player, the Elites would become too fixated on the player's last known position, allowing themselves to be easily flanked. The combat may have been rough for Halo 2, but the story was less so, telling the story of an elite commander who failed to protect the first game's Halo. Disgraced and stripped of his rank, he became the Arbiter, an agent of the Covenant's religious leaders, adorning his disgraced body in unique religious armor. And throughout the story, he'd uncover the truth about Halo's purpose and the great lie that the Covenant religion was built upon. The player could even encounter new armor types in the story that showed different aspects of the Covenant and elite cultures, such as the industrial mining equipment donned by the heretic elites, the regal headdresses of the elite counselors, or even the religious and extravagant vestments of the Prophet's honor guards. The Elites were a loyal and intelligent race that were deliberately blinded by the manipulative Covenant prophets, and by the end of the campaign, the Arbiter had renounced the Covenant and found allies in humanity, as he sought to end the Prophet's control of his species and prevent the firing of Halo. It was a powerful commentary on the dangers of religious fanaticism, and the themes of rebirth and redemption are things Halo 2 did quite well. But the Elites were more than just an emotionally complex alien race, because in the game's multiplayer, they'd become a vehicle that the players could inhabit, offering their own set of first-person animations and heads-up displays. Now, it was Spartan versus Elite. and playable elites became a staple of the series, one that would go on to become just another way for stories and gameplay experiences to be enjoyed within the Halo franchise. Halo 2 was a game that Bungie wasn't very proud of, but like most works of art, these things tend to develop a reputation that transcends what the developers feel. Halo 2 was a fantastic game, and the depth it gave to the elites serves the franchise to this day. But what are your thoughts on the Halo 2 elites? In 2007, the finale to the Halo trilogy was released on the Xbox 360. It was the biggest Halo release at the time, featuring more enemies, an expanded suite of community features such as the groundbreaking theater mode and forge modes, an extensive file share system, and a bigger scale with the power that the new console provided, with the main story of Halo 2 revolving around the elites rising above their manipulative religious masters. The story of Halo 3 saw these once iconic enemies not as foes, but as brothers in humanity's efforts to prevent the firing of Halo. Partnering up with the Master Chief, the Arbiter was a companion in the game's campaign, and when playing in co-op, up to 3 other players could inhabit the role of Chief's new elite allies as they took the fight to the Covenant. Thanks to the increased horsepower of the new console, many modifications were made to the armors of the elites, adding more detail and bulking it up to make them a bit less slender and a bit more in line with Spartan players for the game's multiplayer balancing. The standard jet-like helmet that the elites are known for was given quite a lot of love, further expanding on its design to give the elite heads an even sharper look. And for the Arbiter himself, his armor saw minor changes in the form of new mandible guards and more detail. Interestingly, due to Halo 3's lighting engine, his armor often appears to be almost bronze, which has led the community to interpret it as a deliberate color change, but this isn't the case. It's just a fluke of the lighting engine. Like most aliens in Halo 3, composer and audio director Marty O'Donnell wanted the elites to sound a bit more, well, alien, so the elite vocal cords received an otherworldly warble. This new filter that Marty designed for the elites made the English words they spoke sound as if they were coming from extraterrestrial tongues. It was an effect that Bungie continued to use for the rest of their reign on the series, and it helped the alien beings of the Halo universe seem otherworldly.
Then it is an even fight.
All cruisers fire at will. Burn their mongrel hides.
When looking at the bodies of the elites themselves in Halo 3, not much has actually changed. You just see an increase in detail. But when you combine the new bulky armor with the rather squashed stance that they now have and the rather, at times, unpolished walk cycle, the Halo 3 elites often felt a bit more like a giant, goofy teddy bear version of an elite than the agile and powerful beings from the first 2 games. How are they in gameplay, though? Well, due to their role as allies in the campaign, friendly elite AI can also accompany the players alongside Marine AI. In combat, these elites are noticeably different from past incarnations. They're less lethal and impactful in combat as to not step on the player's toes too much. Though understandable from game design terms, it does lead to the elites just feeling a bit toothless in combat. In the multiplayer, playable elites benefited greatly from the brand new armor customization system, letting players mix and match armors that ranged from all the titles. You had some armors from Halo 2, as well as brand new armors for the elites, such as the Ascetic Armor or Commando Armor. Now, the Commando Armor has a bit of an interesting history to it. Bungie initially tied this armor's access to a Killing Frenzy achievement in the game's multiplayer. Due to a typo on Bungie's part in the game's code, this armor wouldn't unlock for those who got the achievement, and due to strict file restrictions when patching games, Bungie couldn't fix this bug. With nothing else to do, at a later date, Bungie opted to simply allow all players to have access to the Commando Armor for free. It was quite an exciting moment for the community. What was less exciting was an oversight that inadvertently led to the elites being somewhat overpowered in the game's multiplayer. The elites of Halo 3 have different hitboxes to the Spartans, which in general makes headshots harder to achieve when their back faces the player. But a specific helmet, the Assault Helmet, has a gap between the head and body where Bungie forgot to include a hitbox. It's a very odd oversight that was left unfixed in the game, and sparked many wars within the community over if playable elites were overpowered. Which, when wearing this helmet, I think the answer is definitively yes. Halo 3 was the finale to Bungie's Halo trilogy. With the death of the final prophet at the Arbiter's hand, the elite's destiny was back in their hands. There would be much hardship on the road ahead as they picked up what remained of their culture and attempted to rebuild. But for now, in Halo 3, the elites were victorious and free, standing side by side with humanity. They began as foes, but through the sacred Halo rings, these two opposing races became brothers.
I remember how this war started, what your kind did to mine. I can't forgive you, but you have my thanks for standing by him to the end. Hard to believe he's dead.
Were it so easy?
It's easy to forget, but following the release of Halo 3, elites had been mostly phased out as primary antagonists, being usurped by the brutes in Halo's combat loop. Outside of Halo Wars, the elites had taken on a heroic role in players' eyes. This all changed with the release of Bungie's farewell to the series, Halo Reach. It was a technological leap for the series, running on a more advanced version of Bungie's Halo engine, and with that new technology came an increase in quality, infusing Halo's most iconic beings with a level of detail higher than any game previously. The elites of Halo Reach are a substantial increase in quality with more polygons, sharper textures, and an emphasis on the size and strength of these terrifying aliens. Their mandibles are permanently fixed in a sneer, while powerful muscles and veins ripple under their skin. In a nod to Halo Combat Evolved, their eyes were also returned to a cold black color, and their teeth were made sharper. All in all, it was a more aggressive look for the elites, moving away from that soft teddy bear vibe that their Halo 3 incarnations gave off. Their armor was also noticeably toned down, removing much of the bulk from Halo 3 and placing more emphasis on their flexibility and speed, which was helped by a series of new, more expressive animations, both in third and in first person. In the game's campaign and firefight modes, the elites returned to the role they last inhabited in 2004's Halo 2 as the Covenant's leader enemy type. Unlike Halo 2, however, these elites were faster, more aggressive, and more numerous, sporting a variety of new weapons and unit types, such as the new Officer and Field Marshal ranks, while returning ranks such as the Ultra and Spec Ops saw completely new armors being given to them. But most interestingly of all, in the missions of Halo Reach's campaign, players may notice unique elites adorned in gold or white-colored armor that don't match their rank. These are the Bobs. In every mission of the campaign, a Bob elite has a chance of spawning in a variety of locations. Once alerted to the player, they will try to make a quick escape, and if you're fast enough, killing them can nab an achievement. Following Bungie's desire to make Halo Reach a grimmer and more serious Halo game than ever before, the Covenant all now speak in alien tongues, giving them a distant and less personable presentation. Elites will chatter amongst themselves and bark orders that only those who speak the Covenant language can understand.
Low on ammo.
The elites of Reach are also considerably more aggressive and reactive to the player during gameplay, dodging far more often and sprinting at a speed faster than previous games. Their speed often makes them quite hard to keep up with during gunfights as they backpedal at speeds faster than the player while having full weapon capabilities. This, combined with the higher density of enemy combatants, leads to the campaign devolving into more of a shooting gallery than the classic combat dance the series was known for. Playable elites, of course, also returned in the game's multiplayer mode, allowing players to wage war against the UNSC in the asymmetrical Invasion game type, and various other game modes, such as Elite Slayer. Playable elites have roughly 9 extra shield points and 5 extra health points over Spartan players, and they move faster while having the ability to regenerate their health without the need for medkits. This comes at the cost of being a much bigger target than Spartan players, taking shots far more often and making cover a scarcer resource. Bungie's final goodbye to the Halo series left players with an incredible experience. The elites were back in force for the game's campaign with an incredible design and presence. Their appearance in multiplayer was bolstered with the much-loved Invasion game type, and for years following the game's release, the game's extensive social systems allowed Halo's playable elite community to organize, form clans, recruit members, and launch raids against Spartan clans. It was a golden age for Halo's elites, easily their prime. But like all golden ages, they don't last. Darkness was on the horizon for the elites of Halo. But for now, the player base simply enjoyed one of the best Halo releases in the series. Bungie's run on Halo left incredibly large shoes to fill, and a player base that was enjoying the biggest content release for any Halo title, with Halo Reach. But behind the scenes, a new studio, 343 Industries, was crafting a new vision for the Halo universe, ditching much of the anime influences in favor of a more detailed and technically complex spin, one that was rooted in a photorealistic, modern sci-fi art style. During production, many different designs were explored for the Covenant, but ultimately, a very insect-slash-beetle-like focus was chosen. Welcome to the Elites of the Reclaimer Saga. The Elites were adorned in very abstract, shell-like armor, ditching the sleek, religious, and anime style that complemented their bodies in the Bungie games. Their bodies were also redesigned to appear more monstrous and detailed. Their incredibly bright and pale skin were covered in crusty scabs and calluses, and their necks and heads were designed to be less familiar to players and a bit more alien and monstrous, with a thick layer of muscle and bone carrying the rather small, sickly-looking face. A tongue was also considered for the Elites, and even appeared on early models during the game's development, with animations and all, but this was thankfully cut prior to release. During gameplay, the Elites of Halo 4 are more or less familiar if you've played Halo Reach, moving with the same speed and mechanical quirks introduced in that game, such as sprinting backwards while firing their weapons. But due to the Xbox 360's aging hardware, a lack of familiarity with the engine, and the visual fidelity the new developer was trying to push, sacrifices had to be made. Animation quality and AI intelligence seems to have been toned down across the board, making the Elites seem less expressive and reactive during gameplay. The Elites of Halo 4 come off as more robotic and less lifelike when compared to previous installments, but it doesn't stop the production value from being quite high in other areas, with plenty of canned animation sprinkled throughout the levels, such as Elites interacting with computers. Crawling to their deaths, and other activities. The Elites of Halo 4 also still speak in alien tongues, but it should be noted this fictional language is not the same one from Halo Reach. The new developer also remembered to include the voice filter that Marty introduced in Halo 3, and they put it to good effect.
I keep telling you people I don't speak Sangheili.
This was a different look and style for the Elites, and it was a bit divisive in the community, with many disliking the more brutish look and presentation these once honorable warriors had. This stigma was unfortunately made worse by the game's Spartan Ops Mode, where the production company behind its animated cutscenes, Axe Studios, seems to have misunderstood the Elites' animation style and chose to animate them as lumbering, heavy monsters with sluggish reaction time and weighty movements. But what was more controversial than the new design was 343's choice to not let players customize and take their own Elites into online matchmaking. Due to lack of enthusiasm from the studio, playable Elites were completely gutted. When asked why 343 was stripping a staple feature of the series that served the player base well during the Bungie years, then studio head Josh Holmes justified the choice by explaining that it was due to the studio wanting to focus on the multiplayer's new story, players training to become Spartans in simulated battle arenas. It was a pretty weak excuse that didn't do much to reassure Halo's Elite community that they weren't being left behind. This caused most of the playable Elite community to simply migrate back to Reach, a game that, by their standards, had more content and allowed them to thrive together. By the end of Halo 4's lifespan, a majority of the Halo community had also shifted back to the previous title, but that's a story for another day. Halo 4's Elites unfortunately carried a certain stigma within the community. Their gameplay and animation quality felt like a regression from previous titles. The studio's lack of interest in playable Elites definitely was a sore spot, and their narrative presentation often made them appear more monstrous and lumbering. But where Halo 4's Elites truly shined was in the previously mentioned Spartan Ops mode. Spartan Ops told a dual story of heroes and villains, fighting for control of Forerunner artifacts following the events of the game's campaign. The newly formed Covenant was led by an elite in unique black armor who believed the key to godhood was not the activation of Halo, but rather the weaponization of the Forerunner's long-abandoned artifacts. This black elite was manipulated by the creator of the Spartans, Catherine Hall's